Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Survivor 50 Wishlist Podcast, an off-season series where we're trying to figure out who could and should come back for an upcoming returning season of Survivor 50. But today, take that 50, divide it in two, because we are talking Survivor 25 Philippines, a season that brought us right up out of what some consider the dark ages, a source of light, even amidst all that dang rain. Of course, I am not alone here. I am joined by a super great guest, not only a finalist of Survivor proper, but somebody who will forever have Philippines etched in his memory, considering that it was the winner of the season that allowed him to win an advantage in the finale. It is, of course, the delightful Jake O'Kane.
Thanks, Mike. The advantage didn't go anywhere, but I got it. Thanks, Denise.
Yeah, I mean, listen, would it not be an homage to Survivor Philippines if, like, advantages were either not used or came to no use, considering that only one idol was used and no votes were nullified the entire season?
You know what? It's the interesting spot. We're coming out of the dark ages with Philippines, and on to more idols and advantages. But I think this is Philippines kind of Survivor 46 coded, where there's like no great use of advantages other than the one.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to compare it actually to your season, Survivor 45, where it's three tribes, one keeps losing. We're bringing back a returning player in a manner of speaking who had a pre-merge boot in the previous season, so there's not that much experience. You have one tribe basically never go to tribal council for the first half of the game and then completely fall apart in the form of Tandang and Bello. So actually, I think the call's coming a bit from inside the house, Mr. O'Kane.
Oh my god. Mike, did I ever tell you how this was my first full season of Survivor?
No, absolutely not.
I think we had this conversation briefly when you were
when
doing
we
my
when you
pregame
were
stuff.
when we were actually out there, yeah.
Yeah, but I just this season is all because I saw One World sporadically,
Yes.
and then Philippines. I just remember one of the opening scenes.
Yes.
Zane Knight and Denise talking, both in their underwear.
Your dad
Denise
walks
says
in.
something.
Yeah.
Chiron, sex therapist, and I'm like, oh, my dad doesn't like the show now, so
Yes.
I'm in.
Now it's all flashing back to me. I remember that exactly. Of your dad walking in and being like, "Whoa, sorry, whoa, what are you watching?" And all these years later, it brought you back into the fold. So let's talk about Survivor Philippines, because you say bringing us out of the Dark Ages and applicable to history. After the Dark Ages came a Renaissance, and we got that kind of in the form of Philippines, where the show at that point had gotten a little stale, even when they tried twists like Redemption Island, like One World. The format of Survivor and the game itself had kind of been figured out in the format it currently existed in, which is, okay, it's 2 tribes of 9. All you need is a day 1 majority of 5 and then a 3 within that 5. Steamroll your way to get to the 5, then steamroll your way to get to the 3, and hope you win at the end of the day. We saw that especially in 23 and 24, and Philippines really felt like a reckoning in so many ways for the show. First, I would say the cast looked and felt so distinctly different from the seasons that came before, which were a bit more recruit heavy, looking for the younger, fitter, hotter types. We get a bit more of a cross section here in Philippines. And it's interesting to say, Jake, considering that we are currently at a time where the discourse is very much like, ugh, too many 3 tribe seasons. Let's get some variety. Because of that strategy, for the first time in 18 seasons, the show decided that they were going to do a 3 tribe season. It was something that had not been done since All Stars nearly 10 years prior. And as a result, and due to the cast and, of course, the structure and the story of things, it ends up becoming an incredible season of the show.
I mean, I think the return to 3 tribes did so much for Survivor. I know people are a little 3 tribes out right now, but I think, the fall of Matt Singh, it echoes so many of the tribes in the new era that just get blown back very early on. And I do think there's something that's inherently super interesting about nothing ever went right. It's unfortunate you get to the dream to go play the game. I think a lot of that for the tragedy that was excuse me, I'm forgetting the tribe name offhand for this season. No. Blue and this tribe, Malcolm's tribe.
Oh, Metsing.
Thank you. I feel like the tragedy is just encompassed for Russell Swan. I know, other people get voted out, But the whole Russell Swan story, I think, is just super, super captivating for the early part of the season. And that can only happen with the three tribe format, I think.
Yeah, I mean, listen, did it make for compelling strategy in that we had two tribes basically sit on their hands and or sow chaos for the first third of the season? Not necessarily, but yeah, it was almost worth it to see, to your point, a fairly unprecedented storyline occur over the first four episodes where yes, we did have the oolong situation, but this slaps differently a little
Mm,
bit. Maybe it was just this sort of heightened emotion that came, especially in episode 4, which is one of my favorite episodes of Survivor of all time. I really recommend people check it out, especially if you feel that the storytelling of Survivor has gotten too samey. Episode 4 is entirely different, from the use of music to silence to, of course, the cinematography of like the slow-mo pots smashing to symbolize the chance that Matt Singh had of not going to tribal council, slipping out of their grasp. It was a really well done arc overall and ended up working out really nicely. And like you said, this was certainly not the first nor the last time we'll see this happen, but it was the first time that you have somebody like Denise and Malcolm as well survive and thrive in a way. Take advantage of the fact that they are down 2 to 6 after 4 episodes and end up becoming two of the final four. It's a really incredible story. And it also happens due in part to the fact that A, this is a ridiculous newbie cast full of characters that we'll get into. But the other hand, we're still a bit of a foot back in the dark ages, and now we are bringing back returning players, but this is very, very different. And back in the day, Jake, this was something that had been very much whispered about as a what if amongst the Survivor fans, which are like, hey, wouldn't it be fun if they did a season where they brought back the medevaced players? Because for the most part, these people were medevaced in the first half of the season. All three of the guys that come back here were medevaced in episode 6 before the halfway point of their respective seasons.
mm,
And so it made things on a little bit more of an even playing ground in a way, to the point about the other previously medevac contestant who played on your season, in that, these guys don't necessarily know how to run an individual game. They don't know the ins and outs necessarily. Penner a little bit more than the other
mm.
two, but still it did allow, and especially given the personalities around them, it didn't necessarily allow for a curb stomping the way that Coach, Ozzy, and Rob did in the seasons prior.
Totally. And I think just when you have characters like Coach, Ozzy, Rob, and not Russell, but there's this reverence for their ability. Whereas these three guys, it's like, Penner played twice. And even if you did want to look at Cook Islands, Penner wasn't crushing it the whole time. Like, he wasn't seen as someone who is dominant in any way versus Coach gets Final Four and Token Cheats, or Final Five. And then you have Boston Rob getting all the way to the end, Ozzy getting all the way to the end and just being physically dominant the whole time. I think there's more of an even playing field for the returning players, and I think that's what makes it really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And it's like the newbies were actually like, okay, these people are kind of potentially expendable. That's not something we really saw as much in, Fans vs. Favorites 1, where we did have this mix of, new players and old players, or even in Guatemala. I don't think it's super replicated until, you get Edge of Extinction, when they're like, we don't need these guys. But I think that dynamic is very interesting.
Yeah. Before we move forward with the cast proper, I know that we already divided, but allow me to multiply by 2 briefly to bring us back from 25 to 50. Because, Jake, listen, I'd be remiss. We do this with everybody that we bring on as an alumni on this podcast. If I didn't just get you on the record in giving your thumbs up or thumbs down as to whether or not you would like to come back for Survivor 50.
Oh my God, I'd go back. Has anyone actually said no yet?
I mean, I had Stephen Fishback on, who is like one of the firmest no's that I have heard. Much firmer than his bowels in Cambodia. But yeah, suffice it to say, listen, I'm assuming the Sia money has only got you so far, and look, that well's pretty much dry, unfortunately. So you got to go for the million this time around.
Exactly. Sia, I can't rely on Sia anymore. No one from Survivor can rely on Sia anymore. So, I'd love to go back. If I get given that opportunity, that would be a dream on top of a dream come true. You know what I mean?
All right. Well, let's see if we can add some people today that may be sharing a beach with you in Fiji this time next year. Let's get into the cast of Survivor Philippines. And we start, as always, with our final 3. We have the aforementioned Denise, and then tied for second place We have, of course, one of our medevacs returning players in Michael Skupin and Lisa Welchel. And this is another sort of hallmark of this era, is that there's these odd celebrity castings, and sometimes the celebs they bring on are not necessarily fans of Survivor. Sometimes they're super fans. Lisa Welchel apparently was a big fan of Survivor, apparently sent in an audition video. But of course, if you don't know her, formerly Blair from The Facts of Life, child star, finds her way onto the show, only gets outed by like one person due to the generation gap, but makes her way all the way to second place here, which is just a wild thing in and of itself on top of a wild season. Also should be noted, Jake, this is, I believe, on average, the oldest Final Three in Survivor history.
That is really impressive. I mean, two of these people are great, just really great.
I wonder which two.
That's it. Yeah, no, I think the cool thing about this final two and then plus another person is that, Denise goes to every single tribal council. Like, there's no other person who's won the game who's done that. Like,
Yeah.
that's a really impressive statistic. And I don't know if that can ever be replicated again.
Yeah, Kenzie got close. She did miss out on one tribal council in the pre-merge, and now in the new era, this like split tribal council situation means you're automatically missing out on one. But yeah, I mean, considering that the goal of the game, first and foremost, is to not get voted out, the person who puts themselves in the most danger of getting voted out, I believe she won an individual immunity like once, maybe twice, but it is still incredibly astounding, especially in that middle stretch of the game when she becomes like the lone new kid in town on Calabar. Luckily, she's able to take advantage of this gender gap, but it is still incredibly astounding. And it's not due to just luck. I mean, to your point about that lower third, emphasis more so on the therapist side of things, Denise has those interpersonal skills where, ironically enough, despite being one of the shortest soul survivors, she's able to meet people on their level and is able to reason with them and try to empathize and sympathize with them. That makes her then a more reliable person to work with. I think that's what got her and Malcolm on the same page early on. It's what, in that final three vote with her and Malcolm and Russell, makes her the one in the middle, right? It's between Russell's voting out Malcolm. He's not voting out Denise because he feels good about Denise. And it's something that's going to bring her into all of this maelstrom of an alliance that happens in the post-merge. So I think it's a really incredible win, even outside of the fact that she went to tribal council in every single episode. I mean, again, Jake, you could speak to somebody who did not go to tribal council for half the game. That is a wild accomplishment.
That's really impressive. It's so cool because then also, not only that, Denise does so well on Winners at War as well. I know the edit is understated for her in Winners at War, but it was really impressive what she was able to do. And then something that I want to say, if we can move to Lisa, that's all right.
Yeah.
Lisa, I forgot how much I loved Lisa Welchel on this season. She's not someone you might think about as, oh, Lisa is a dominant strategic player. Lisa's not bad at this game at all. And the cool thing about Lisa, in that I think I really appreciate from like a show perspective, is that she's such a great narrator in the sense of her emotional and mental struggle moving forward in the game and how she has to cut these relationships off. And she does, and that's something that anyone who plays Survivor and like goes deep in the game, that's something they have to consider. But I think Lisa probably has one of the best narrations of that feeling and letting that story go to the audience. And it was after playing, before playing Survivor, it's like strategy. But like after, it's like, it has given me, maybe I'm a little bit older now, but like gives you appreciate these more human moments that do happen out there. And Lisa experienced a lot of them and orated so many of them beautifully.
Yeah, I believe she was one of the first people to have the hashtag Survivor Meltdown show up on the screen, because she does struggle really in the beginning on Tandang, and that's where she makes a bond with the man to her right, who shall not be named and shall not be talked about for the sake of this list. He can watch Survivor 50 behind bars for all I care, but Lisa, I really enjoy. Again, with celebrity casting, you're sometimes rolling the dice as to like whether or not they can hack it or whether or not they care. And Lisa absolutely did. But to your point, once she gets her feet under her, once Tandang is sort of afforded this win streak and she gets into the merge, then she becomes a bit of a player, starting with when she's just randomly doing laundry and she finds Malcolm's idol. And now she's the secret keeper and it's not kept for very long. To when her and Skupin end up becoming the Fulcrum Alliance, right? And really determine how the end game goes and turning on Tandang and then going with Denise and Malcolm to then take out the rest of the Calabas. She is definitely a power player. I would not necessarily define her as Penner did as like the yoke to the ox that was Denise in a manner of speaking. Or maybe I'm misattributing the metaphor. The unfortunate news for Lisa is that in her quarantine questionnaire, she said in so many words, when asked if she would play again, no. I got what I wanted, and more importantly, what I needed, and I am forever grateful for that. I'm content to enjoy the show from the warmth, comfort, and emotional safety of my own home. Thank you very much. So, yeah, she's getting her runner-up money, and she's getting the fan favorite prize, and is kind of getting the hell out of Dodge for Survivor consideration.
And like that's so impressive that she got fan favorite over Malcolm. Because like, if you don't remember Lisa Welcho, remember how big Malcolm was, and Lisa Welcho beat him for the fan favorite award. Like that's so impressive.
So
I'm so happy. I'm so happy I didn't fall into the fire, so I shared a statistic with one of these people.
That's true.
I was so close to sharing that statistic. Thank God.
Oh my God. Yeah, you were nearly there. You were nearly there. But I'm so happy that you ended up sharing a statistic with Lisa, at least, and that you both were fan favorite winners in a manner of speaking. You were more of a singular fan favorite, where she is more so representing the population, though I don't know how many Sprint users there were back in 2012. Let's take a step back and talk about Denise for a second, because you mentioned Winners at War. Denise does come back, and the question is, would she want to come back for a third time? Would we want to see her for a third time? I don't think I've picked up like an explicit statement from her one way or the other. If someone can find it, absolutely let me know. The sense I got in the immediate wake of Winners at War was that she was good. You know, she ended up getting those tattoos, Endure and Survive, and I think that's what she's kind of remembering her experience by. I don't think she went out with her head as high as the person that went out after her in Ben in Winners at War, but I do think she still went out like relatively satisfied with her experience, where I don't know, to your point, I think there was a lot of strong stuff happening in that season, especially in the pre-merge, but I don't know if Denise necessarily feels that hunger to come out from time number 3, nor do I necessarily think the fans are hungry to see her come back again.
Yeah, I mean, Denise is an amazing player, and no one can take that away from her. One win, another very deep run in a game of very, very good players. But yeah, the one thing that I wouldn't say let's get Denise back right away is just, what are we going to see new? I don't know if Denise brings anything new to the table. She is that good. This isn't a knock on her abilities in any way, but I don't know what's Denise 3.0 that wasn't 2.0 or 1.0.
All right. Well, with all of our finalists left off the short list, that opens things up for our jury. And that's good, because this is a character-filled jury, to say the least. Working our way up from the bottom to the top, we have one RC Saint Amour. We have, of course, our other big celebrity casting of the season, former Major League Baseball player Jeff Kent. We have 2 of the villainous trio that ends up getting taken down in the middle part of the game in Artis and Pete. We have one of our returnees in the form of Jonathan Penner. We have, of course, his right-hand man, he of the grocery store meme, Carter. We have the villain of the season, if not one of the biggest villains of the 20s, who then comes back for a second chance in Abby Maria. And we have the guy who you just mentioned and who I want to start with here in our near fan favorite this season, turns into a favorite next season, both in the Sprint Award as well as from a literal tribe designation perspective, and comes back one more time as a game changer, Malcolm Freeberg. Okay, look, I get it. This is the Simpsons meme of say the line, Bart. Everyone's waiting for me to say something about Malcolm, because one time there was a live show when he was booted from Game Changers, and I was caught on camera pointing and laughing, him getting voted out. Listen, I'm going to sort of, deride the meme a little bit. I really like Malcolm. I like Chaos more, which I think is where that reaction ended up coming from in the moment. But I've always really enjoyed Malcolm. I mean, you talk about great narrators in Lisa. I think Malcolm is right up there as well. And it really speaks to one of the things I love about this guy, which is, look, you take a look at him. This was, a bartender from Hermosa Beach, California at the time, in his 20s, has his long hair tied back, which has him, in my opinion, I think unfairly compared to like your Joey Amazings and your
Yeah.
Ozzies, because there's so much more to Malcolm. And it really is this sort of nerdier brain, for lack of a better term, and kind of this jockey visage, considering that he calls Abby Maria a freaking Dementor, which feels like a very, in-depth reference for 2012, especially.
Yeah, I mean, Malcolm was so huge. Like Malcolm was like, he was the guy. Like, didn't they invited him for Blood versus Water, and he said no, right?
Yeah, they were
They're like,
gonna do
1, 2, 3, let's go.
Yeah, 3 seasons in a row of Malcolm, which if they brought his brother out, the one that he had visit him, that had just as much personality as Malcolm, I would have loved it. I know Malcolm would have
Oh
been
my
exhausted, but his brother wouldn't be.
Oh man, that the Game Changers episode is so rough. It's so rough because it was just like, that's not who you want twist screwing. You don't want twist screwing over people like that. But it was so captivating to watch him week to week. He's so funny. Like you were going to be able. He's a great narrator as well. He has it all. How many individual immunities he wins this season? 3.
I think he
Right?
wins 2 or 3. Yeah, I mean,
2 or 3?
unfortunately, the one that he should have won is, the one that he ends up quite literally fumbling towards the end. And who knows, were it not for some shaky hands or that particular immunity challenge, even though he has an advantage in it, he would have gone ahead and won the game, and maybe he comes back for Winners at War.
If I'm going to share it, I share a statistic with Malcolm. I like that statistic.
I love that. Yeah, there you go.
Blowing the immunity challenge after an advantage.
True, though, to be fair, I think Malcolm, if he was pulling a Jake, would have like smashed the pieces over his knee once his ball dropped.
Yeah, he would just whip the ball, like whips one of the things at Jeff's face, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I absolutely adore Malcolm because, yeah, he is dealt this incredibly poor hand and is definitely one of the heroes of our story throughout, considering that him and Denise are obviously the underdogs in the first 4 episodes. And then he gets brought into Tandang and just like immediately gets brought into the fold. I think because Tandang's kind of coming apart at the seams, but because Malcolm just seems like this really genial, chill guy, which then masks this gamesmanship to him, which we see, I think, to a greater extent in his next season, where he ends up getting to the merge. The favorites are in a comfortable position, but he decides to join up with like the Bros and Corinne, who start getting taken out. And Malcolm gets feisty. And it was a really fun version to see a Malcolm who, again, has had his back against the wall before, but not in this way. And we see him especially get very advantage happy. He is somebody who asked Reynolds to play an idol on him during the infamous hold up bro moment. He's going to be somebody who finds 2 idols and uses that to instigate the 3 Amigos tribal council, which, look, yes, especially in hindsight, is definitely something that is a bit overrated in terms of actual strategic efficiency, but it was still a very unprecedented moment, and I think really serves as one of the earliest markers of like a live tribal council at that time. He nearly finds a 3rd idol were enough for Andrea babysitting him. And so I think it's very deserved that Malcolm ends up winning this fan favorite in Karamoan, because despite the fact that he finishes much, much lower, I think he finishes in like 8th place, I want to say, he absolutely cuts a swath through this game, and I think would be a game that translates very well to the new era, which again admires all this scrappiness and especially idol hungriness.
Yeah, I mean, Malcolm's one of these guys. If you put some kind of advantage in his hands, you're just like, what is he going to do with it? You're like, if you put an idol in his hand, he's not just going to go play an idol. We're going to have the hold up, bro. We're going to have the 3 Amigos. We're going to have him pulling out a tribal council and be like, hey, just so everyone knows. You know what I mean? Like, Malcolm is the person that you want to see back because he is going to do something different.
Yeah.
You're not going to get the same Malcolm. And, like, when was Game Change? Game Change was like 2016, 2017. Like, we got a little old. How old is Malcolm now?
Yes. So
38?
Malcolm is currently 37, so you're almost on the money there.
Yeah. So, like, we're going to see a little older Malcolm this time. Like, in Game Changers, we didn't get to see that much from him. So, really, we're dating back to, like, Caramon. We haven't seen him play in like 11 years. That's why. That's an entirely different thing. And I'm really excited to see. I want Malcolm back.
Yeah.
Are we supposed to say that yet? Yeah, Malcolm needs to come back, right?
I want to see him back as well. The question is, does he want to come back? This is his answer to the quarantine questionnaire. The answer isn't an immediate yes, like it was when I was younger. I accidentally grew up since my first time out about 9 years ago and have something called responsibilities now. It's far cry from the year before Philippines when I was living with too many roommates in a dingy beach house, bartending nights to make ends meet. Then again, it's always hard to say no. CBS calls and essentially says, "Would you like to spend over a month in the most beautiful tropical locations on the planet playing an adult obstacle course for a chance to win $1 million?" And I still need a Soul Survivor title. So we'll see. Jake, I
That's a
think
lot
that's
of
about
words for yes.
yeah,
That's a
that's about
lot
the
of words for yes.
and that shows again. Malcolm is also a very fun writer. If you remember the blog that I don't know if he still does, but he certainly did for a good portion of time. I think it was called like Whiskey Ninja Turtles or something. So yeah, of course he's a wordsmith both on and off the page. But yeah, like you said, a very soft yes for Malcolm. So I would love to see it as well. I think he is one of these non-winners that yes, it would be time number 4 for him. But first off, did the third time really count? And secondly, it's been so long, and he has shown so much connection, I think, to the new era in the way that he played previously that I really think he'd take to it like a whale shark to water.
Yeah, it'd be fine. It'd be fine. Like, and do we think they do three tribes for 50? I don't think they would do three tribes for 50, but like
Would Malcolm get
he's been on.
PTSD?
I know, right? But he's been on. He's had both experiences: two tribes of 10, and then three tribes of 6. So like, regardless of how they go with it, like Malcolm has the experience of both and getting through at least both pre-merge stages of those games.
Well, let's move one space to his right and talk about the other person from this jury who ended up returning for a future season, Abby Maria Gomez. Of course, Abby, firebrand would be describing it mildly. This is someone who I absolutely adore because she is somebody who is going to speak her mind in so many words. Of course, uttering infamous quotes like, "You F with me, you're dead," calling people poopy pants and moldy clowns. And look, certainly vilified in the moment, but if you look back, Jake, the main people that she was going after were Michael Skupin and Joe Anglim. So I do feel like history is maybe on the side of Abby a little bit in retrospect.
It's so is she like? Do we consider her? She's not a villain now, right? Like that kind of washed off. Like I don't know when did all that post Cambodia, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So yeah, who knows? Maybe Abby's a hero after all in retrospect. But yeah,
I
Abby is just incredible. I mean, her I think impulsiveness is something that I've always adored about her. Again, going back to "You F with me, you're dead," where she'll
no,
immediately hold grudges, whether it's her friendship and alliance with RC immediately dissolving within like a week, whether it's of course going after Wu for writing her name down not once but twice. And she's someone who has made it to the end of the game or the penultimate episode, I believe, both times that she's
yeah.
played. So we've always got a dose of her as well.
And I'm like, I find it interesting to like look up confessional accounts. Like
Hmm.
she's not low. Like she is a pretty big narrator. Like on both of her seasons. I mean, even in Cambodia, like Cambodia, I think has a lot of people where they really spit gold, and she's right there with them. You know what I mean? So she's one of these people who, I don't think you're going to come out here and say Abby is the best strategic player out here. But if you look at the kind of people who have done very well in the new era, Abby's kind of in the mix. Like, I think Abby, it would be really interesting to see what Abby does since Cambodia, since 2015,
Hmm.
if she were to come back. Um, but yeah, Abby was always super fun. Very, that at that time, just one of these villains that you could really sink your teeth in, that you could just really, ooh, that's fun. Or hate, because some people like to hate people, but, for fun TV purposes without being a piece of shit. But yeah, Abby was always great TV, and it was always a treat.
Yeah,
When,
I mean, listen, even if her strategy is not up to stuff, if you watch that one sequester game, that her social is on fleek.
yep.
Unfortunately, so, when asked about it, she wasn't given a quarantine questionnaire, but I know when I was checking out a cast interview with Rob for a different Wishlist podcast I'll be doing, she had actually said that she'd been talking with Abby recently and had communicated that Abby had kind of, quote, gotten Survivor out of her system, that she was in
Mm,
this stable relationship, has this very flourishing career as a real estate agent, and was able to kind of say, "I did this thing, I did it again, and I'm ready to move on with my life." But if we're talking straight from the player's mouth, There was an article that got posted in an interview that Parvati did with Dalton Ross, where she had said that she wouldn't want to play Survivor again because she had felt that if she were to go back out there, she would be immediately voted out just because of her reputation and her perception. And Abby responded to the article saying, quote, "I wouldn't return on Survivor for the same reason." So unfortunately, while this summer is all about House of the Dragon, we will not be seeing the Brazilian Dragon seemingly on Survivor 50.
I disagree with their analysis. I don't think Abby is in a median first boot. I really don't.
Yeah. I mean,
I
listen,
disagree with her.
we saw multiple times that people were willing to take her to the end, either as a GOAT or as a loyal ally. That's the other thing as well, is I think sort of like Shane Powers or even Sandra to a certain extent, that the villainy is more so associated with the personality than the
Right.
gameplay. Where like,
Right.
yes, Abby does end up cutting RC, but she is someone who has found some loyal people to stick with, whether it was Artisan Pete in Philippines or the Witches Coven in Cambodia. She is somebody that will like find a group and glom onto them, which is maybe not strategy like some of the other biggest villains in Survivor history.
Yeah. I mean, like the pre-merge of Cambodia, she was utter gold. The whole bracelet gate. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Again, speaking towards that impulsiveness, like she happens to find her bracelet in somebody else's bag and says, "PG, that's it. I'm going to screw over a numbers advantage as soon as we swap to get rid of you." That's Abby Maria in a nutshell. And listen, I'm just happy for any time we get of her. It's unfortunate that it doesn't seem a third time is likely. Yeah. But let's work our way down here, because I will just say Jonathan Penner, we know, already on the ballot. But I'll briefly get your thoughts, Jake. Thoughts on a Penner 4.0? I mean, talk about a guy who has gone through so much since the last time he played.
Penner is going to be amazing. Penner needed to be on the list without a doubt. Is he like one of the best narrators in Survivor history? Like, there's really like if he's not the best, he's in the conversation as being the best. He's just so engaging, and I don't know if it's that writer in him or like Hollywood, but
he's a storyteller, Jake. That's what he does.
It's what he does. But it's like it never even comes from a place where it's like above, you know what I mean? Like, some people like, oh, like they're a writer. It's like, Jonathan's, I just write. Yeah. Like there's a blue collar feel to Jonathan, which I think has always been really appealing by always just weaving in these colorful words and colorful comparisons. And Penner always needs to be in the conversation to come back.
All right, well, let's move to the person below him as we'll work our way up the jury. So let's talk about Abby's friend turned nemesis in the form of Roberta Claire, RC Saint Amour, and talk about sort of like a pastiche of her time, right? There was a brief like 3-year window where RC was everywhere. She was the first winner of Miss Survivor back when Rob did that, beating out the likes of like Kim Spradlin, Andrea Belke, etc. She has definitely one of the most distinctive Survivor laughs I can remember since Kathy Vavrick O'Brien. And there was a world where RC did make a return appearance. For those that don't know, we'll be talking about this in a couple days, but RC and her dad, Craig St. Amour, were scheduled to be on, of course, Survivor Blood versus Water, season 27, but Craig failed a last-minute health check done by the medics on site, and unfortunately was unable to clear things to get onto the season. And so they were kind of disqualified prior to the season, and John and Candace Cody were flown in last minute. RC was then given an opportunity, at least given the ask, to be on Survivor Cambodia. But according to Jeff Probst, as he told Dalton Ross, RC we wanted, and she didn't want to play. And I understood, RC came out to play Blood versus Water and her dad got sick. And I've heard enough survivors tell me that the emotional journey is so strenuous that she just thought, you're going to put Abby on the list too, and I don't want to see her. Let's just forget it. Maybe we can revisit RC another time and she'll want to come back. For what it's worth, Jake, we just said Abby's not going to be on this list.
Like now, because I'm hearing this and I remember this vaguely, but where was RC on Game Changes?
I mean,
I know there was a spot in there for her. Like, come on now.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God. But yeah, RC, I loved RC. Like, at the time, she was amazing TV. And like, if you have the time to go watch Ponderosa videos, Watch Asi and
Yeah,
Ponderosa.
if you miss Ponderosa, you'd miss it even more watching these Ponderosa videos
Oh,
from Philippines, particularly when Abby gets voted out, and it just leads to if you think all tensions of the game calm down as soon as people leave the environment of deprivation and insomnia, no, it almost amplified with having Abby and RC well fed, showered, and arguing with each other at Ponderosa.
it's like the edit of the show might have made you think that like, oh, Abby's the instigator. No, she instigates this stuff too. She is stirring the pot. This is not Abby exclusive. Like, even the stuff before Abby was there, she was poking it. Hey Pete, hey Pete. So that was kind of dumb to come after me. It's like, leave me alone. Like it was so like it's so good. It's like, damn. And like the only thing that was really interesting about Tandang early on had to do with IC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm not sure if RC has given any opinions as to whether or not she would play. Now she is 39 years old, which again is definitely not up there, but I would like to assume she would. Again, my worldview based on the Jeff quote is that like RC specifically did not want to come back if there was a guarantee that Abby was. And look, as wonky as some of the second chance voting was, with Abby being on the list, she was pretty much guaranteed to be voted on no matter what. So I do think that RC would give Survivor another shot, especially now with like some time away and maybe the guarantee of there not being Ponderosa videos to slander her character.
I think the only problem with one of the major problems standing in Asi's way from coming back at some point, I think, is Angelina. I feel like Angelina and her
Mm.
fill a very, very similar spot. I'm pretty sure they're probably similarly aged, as like these women that do like push people's buttons and will stir the pot. I think if Angelina's out, like Asi definitely has to be in the question.
Yeah,
I mean, like
would you believe
like Angelina's. Sorry,
would
what?
you believe RC is 4 years older than Angelina?
Oh, is she?
Yeah.
Oh,
She,
I would not have guessed that.
Angelina's 35.
Well, then there you go.
Yeah. So that's interesting, though. I have always thought about casting a Survivor season of like not doppelgangers, but sort of like old era and new era versions of each other. And not to
Mm.
say they're both technically old era, but it would be, I mean, good God, it would be like a particle accelerator if RC and Angelina were on the same beach. You know, one would be laughing up a storm in her leopard print bikini, and Angelina would try to be wheeling and dealing to get her the hell out of here. It would be absolutely fantastic.
They should do it. They should
Yeah.
have both of them. That's the
Come on.
tribe I want to watch.
There you go. Let's leaving money on the table. Well, let's talk about a guy who's made a lot of money before Obama took it. Let's talk about Jeff Kent here because yes, Lisa has a wild story for biggest celebrity, but Jeff Kent does as well. This is a guy who, if you don't follow Major League Baseball, was considered one of the biggest assholes in baseball history at the time. You can find reports upon reports of all these arguments Jeff Kent was getting into, all these things he was saying about very beloved figures like Vin Scully, who is like one of the, most fan favorite announcers of all time. Jeff Kent's like, he talks too much. Like this guy was an absolute capital V villain. And he comes into the game and he really is the narrative on Calabaw for
Mm.
the pre-merge when they are honestly 3 out of 3 in terms of entertainment and in storyline, where he is initially going to be the one kind of leading this charge against Jonathan Penner, then joining Jonathan Penner when Penner reveals that he has the idol, even though he's going to do the old 4-finger handshake to show that he actually was lying the entire time. There's the whole storyline with Dawson where she obviously knows who he is and she hints at it in oh so many words. And so Jeff takes her out. And then it culminates in one of the wildest voting outcomes I've ever seen, where we have this wild tribal council where Lisa reveals Malcolm's idol. Abby reveals that she has an idol out of nowhere. The tribes basically split down the middle. And in a 5-4-1 vote, by one vote from, of all people, Penner throwing a vote onto Abby, being confused, Jeff Kent is voted out and in the process espouses one of the most infamous final words in tribal council history. Jake, give me the pitch on Jeff Kent.
I think here's the pitch on Jeff Kent. Out of famous athletes that have been on the show, I think he has one of the best arguments for being the most dynamic, who who has come in and played. And honestly, like, he was playing not that bad. Like, he gets by that vote. I mean, how deep is he going? Like, and that vote is so good and it's so wild and it's that's one of the best parts of the season is the Jeff Kent boot. But Jeff, like, really for the first time, I think, not for the first time, but when Jeff comes into the season, like, he's saying, Penn is gone. I need Penner out of here. He needs to be out of here. And that's like what's not a common narrative looking at, you know, the previous captain seasons in Guatemala, Redemption Island, and South Pacific. It was very like, oh yeah, you like Christine or in Stacey, the temporary players.
Right.
You're gone immediately. Jeff makes the merge with that mentality, even though the thoughts on Penn have shift. But that whole, all right, he's a problem. He's experienced this. That's the kind of mindset that you want, especially from a newbie player. Like, and I think the cool thing about Jeff is that, you know, a lot of people are starstruck by the returning players. Not really this season as much. I feel like every single returning player this season gets shit on by the rest of the tribe in some way, shape, or form. Right? Like, now I'm thinking about it. Oh, like, no one really respected their returning player on this season whatsoever. But I think Jeff does come in and he has this bravado to him that I think it is engaging. And it's like, you know, I think a lot of people get bored with like the alpha male type characters who are like, let me take my group and march to the end. There's a little bit of sneakiness in Jeff that I think that typical alpha male does not have. And I think that's what makes one of the things that makes Jeff so captivating.
Yeah. So the biggest question I think Jeff for me is would he want to come back? He is 56 years old currently, and believe it or not, Jake, we're talking about yet another person that could have been on the ballot for second chances because in the same interview where Jeff talks about RC, he had said that Jeff Kent was a guy that ... He didn't say no, but we said, look, we have to cut the list down. Are you in or are you out? And he said, you know, call me another time. So he was wishy-washy. And so I wonder if he was wishy-washy back in 2015, is that laundry properly dry in 2025?
Jeff, I think he was a product of that time and like that era. I don't personally need to see Jeff again. I mean, you can tell like they tried to recreate Jeff through John Rocca to probably not the best idea, but like Jeff, obviously Jeff, people really like Jeff on production.
Yeah. Well, let's move to the last juror I want to talk about, with no offense to the other two. And let's talk about a diamond in the rough here, not a baseball diamond in the rough. I want to talk about Pete Yurkowski, because you talk about someone that is kind of lost in time or represents that era. I think that Pete is somebody who, look, if you look at the place he finishes, it's in 8th. It's not necessarily the most representative of the game he was playing, which was this guy sitting there pre-merge, not going to tribal council and deciding, I'm going to cause a little bit of chaos. He is the wedge between Abby and RC besides their respective personalities, where he takes the idol clue that Abby and RC had found together, hides it in RC's bag. Abby finds it, and as a result, RC has to read the clue out to everybody. And it then creates this huge rift between them that obviously shatters apart when the merge hits. Now, look, was it the best gameplay? I don't necessarily think so, to fracture your tribe immediately at the first individual vote just for the lulz or to get Abby Maria on your side. But it goes to show a mischievous side of Pete that was so much fun. I think, unfortunately, the era that Pete was cast in, you know, there were only limited opportunities to bring people back. Of course, you have Karamoan, and then you have Blood versus Water, and then that's pretty much it. Like, you really have to pop to be back on Cambodia or Game Changers, especially for Pete's archetype, where he was this like young, fitter man. But again, like Malcolm, I believe that doesn't necessarily represent all that Pete contains.
I think the really good thing about Pete is that, like, you know, you get a lot of these people in, you know, 21, 22, 23, 24 that are very like, they're pretty boys. Are they really giving anything? No, they're not. And we all know who they are. We could list a bunch of them off. But Pete is not one of them. I mean, at first glance, you're like, yeah, Pete probably falls in line with a half of the Monono tribe from the previous season who, you know, whatever. But he brought something to the table when nothing was going on. Malcolm had to start playing right at the jump. He's going to tribal council. Pete was just bored.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then like Pete almost goes too early. Like we don't see enough of him once the merge comes around. Like Pete is one of those guys, and I think he's similar to Malcolm in a lot of ways. He's just clearly overshadowed by Malcolm this season. Malcolm's got the hair. Malcolm went deeper. Malcolm had the idol. But Pete also has mischievous side. He has the physical ability. He clearly has some social skills as well. Like Pete is one of those people that is unfortunately just been overlooked over the course of time in Survivor history. Like, you got guys later coming down. I'm trying to think, like, you got Jay and Millennials versus Gen X probably fit a similar role. And you could probably think of a couple more that are, traditionally attractive male who, you know what, they're pretty funny and they'll get mischievous as well. And it's unfortunate that Pete has been overlooked so much throughout time. Because when I watched the season for the first time, I was a big Pete fan. Everything Pete was selling, I was buying. You know what I mean? Like, I loved it. It was so good. And if you forget Pete, go back and watch him because he is really he is a really interesting character who wants to play the game his way. And I think that's always interesting to see.
Yeah, and he was, I think, smarter than he lets on, too. I believe he was like an engineering student when he first played. So he is currently 36. And for what it's worth, on Survivor Reddit, like there was a random thread about should Pete come back? And somebody sent a comment saying like, oh yeah, he probably doesn't have his gym body anymore. And Pete himself replied, setting this from the gym on a shamelessly randomly Reddit yourself excursion and feel compelled to reply, it's been 10 years. Modern Survivor / edit style feels like a Big Bang Theory episode. I doubt I fit an archetype anymore, but if they call, I'll go.
Yeah, I mean, Pete, he should, if they call him, he should go back. Pete would be good TV. It's like nothing Pete is doing wrong, right? Like if Pete doesn't get the call, it's not because Pete wasn't amazing. It's not because Pete wasn't all these laundry list of things that you want to see from a Survivor player. It's that it's just there's the new iPhone, the new whatever, like it's keeping up with the Joneses, and he's just been kind of left behind.
Yeah.
I'd like to see Pete again, personally.
I agree. I mean, listen, you do casting all the time. It's very much that idea, right? Of like, everyone's performing to the best of their ability. It's just sometimes people have that je ne sais quoi that fit the casting call more than Pete's type. But for the experiment of this, I think is someone that we could certainly give an eye to, considering that we're not necessarily filling up those archetypes. It's pretty much unlimited soup, salad, and breadsticks over here at our Olive Garden.
And to be fair to Pete, I don't know what Pete's doing in his life now. Maybe Dad Pete would be really interesting. You know what I mean? Couldn't you see like Pete has 2 daughters. Like I have to like, couldn't you see him giving a confessional? I gotta go punch away these young guys.
I mean, it'd be interesting because listen, yes, he gets compared to Malcolm, but Malcolm, unlike Pete, did not date one of his main allies after the season like Pete did with Abby Maria.
There's also a little history. Abby Maria, if we get Pete and Abby Maria on a tribe, can we do that?
Oh my
God. That's probably the best way to get Pete. Convince Abby to come back. And then,
it's like the opposite of RC then. As long as Abby is on the season, Pete would want to be on the season.
It's not Pete would want to. It's their production. Hey, they had a relationship with Michelle and Wendell. Let's do it.
Any spare thoughts about people like Artis and Carter? I feel bad because I do think out of maybe the entirety of the Survivor Philippines cast, these are probably 2 of the more understated players. But Carter at least has the copy pasta to live on in infamy.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that sucks is I remember Artis had a really cool story of applying a million times. He's like a cancer survivor as well. He has a really compelling story. And then I'm looking at the confessional counts for the season right now. Everyone, normal numbers, whatever. Kata and Artis both 8.
Yeah,
I'm
pretty sure Artis is also his only content was him complaining about scooping as well. Yeah. So it's your Survivor time is both limited in confessional count, and the only confessionals you have are talking about now a convicted felon.
It just sucks because it's I know it was only 40 minutes back then, but we couldn't have given them something, because I understand people can be upset if their entire edit is about another person, and that makes sense, but. He's an interesting dude. I would like to see more from Artis personally, but Kata, the Reddit thing is funny now.
All right, well, let's move into our pre-mergers here. And look, I would say not as much of a star-studded group as the jury, but there's still a lot to talk about here. We, of course, have Katie, who I believe was the first contestant from Delaware. We have Dawson, the person to both out Jeff Kent and jump out of her seat and kiss Jeff Probst multiple times over the course of this season. We have Dana, I think she was a motorcycle mechanic who unfortunately falls victim to like getting so sick that she can't get medevac but has to remove herself from the game. We have, of course, one of our returning players in Russell Swan, the final victim of Matt Singh. We have Angie Cookies Layton. We have Roxy Morris, who was caught speaking in tongues. And we, of course, have maybe until Jelinski, one of the most iconic first boots in Survivor history in Zayn Knight. Let's go back to Russell for a second. When Evie and I were talking about Russell Swan, we felt like we had gotten the full story, that I think the unanswered question of like, how would Russell do were he not medevac was kind of answered in this season. That yes, the circumstances weren't ideal, but he was put on a tribe that was almost the polar opposite in Galoo, where he went from winning all the time to losing all the time. He was voted out properly. He had his Lord, I mean Jeff moment and his beautiful swan song in a manner of speaking. I feel okay with being done with him, but do you see another flight for Pilot Russ here?
You know what? Like, the thing with Russell's story is that it's wrapped in such a nice, tragic bow, if that makes sense. It's like, he's such a captivating speaker, and I know we brought it up at the beginning of this, but go watch episode 4 of Philippines if you haven't seen it. It's one of the best pre-merge episodes of the show out there. I was really thinking about it before this podcast because, like, Russell is such a captivating speaker, and I don't know how well he would be able to adapt to the new era where we wouldn't see a situation like what happened in this season. But like the really cool thing about Russell is that even though he's only there 4 episodes, you do get to see like his drive, what motivates you. And I do feel like we got who Russell was. Like there's I don't know if Russell could bring anything else to the table than what we saw. And he left it all out there. And I mean that as a respect to him because I like hearing the story about his childhood. It's like you lean in, like you lean in when he speaks. And I know he's an attorney and he's one of those people. It's like, damn, I would really love to see him in a courtroom. I don't think I put him on this list to go back on another season.
Well, not to mention as well, there's a lot of talk with returnees about like, oh, how much will their game change? And again, we saw from Russell that he was in a different tribe and kind of ruled over it the exact same way, right? He's the one that comes in and makes the speech immediately, sort of like what Bruce does on your tribe, being like, oh, I promise I'm not the leader in charge right now. Yeah. We're all going to work together. By the way, move this, do that, do that. And so he immediately kind of defaults back into that mode. And it leaves you to question, is there any other mode he could be in?
Yeah, there is a similarity there to like, being the leader and like, can you take that leader out of people? Russell, I think we got that answered. I don't think the leader will come out of Russell, and that's cool. And you like, you know, normal life, that's awesome, and a lot of respect to him. But yeah, it's I know I don't want to see him again on another season, but go back and watch, even just watch episode 4. Seriously, it's the Russell show, and it's amazing.
All right, Jake. Let's talk about Zayn Knight for a second, because good God, just to give the resume of what Zayn Knight does within one, granted it was an extended episode, but still one episode of Survivor at that. He hits Matt Singh Beach, makes an alliance with every woman on the tribe, makes final 2 deals, then goes to Russell and Malcolm and says, oh, by the way, I made deals with everybody else, but I'll join you all and Denise, and I'll be a 4th here. He then proceeds to like completely bungle the challenge for Matt Singh. He's just completely out of breath the entire time. His face is as blue as the paint that he put on half of it. Then he gets back to camp, tells everybody, hey, it was me who screwed up the challenge. Vote me out. Then says in confessional that was actually a ploy, because the people that truly ride with him and like him would make sure that he doesn't go. So then he starts to scramble to protect himself. Then at Tribal Council, he reveals, yeah, the reason why I was out of breath was because I quit smoking the day before the game. And after all these machinations, 3 days of just being a spinning top, he goes to the bottom and is voted out unanimously.
Zayn. Oh my God. Go watch episode 4 of Philippines. Go watch episode 1 of Philippines. Like the flame out has not like if you got into Survivor in the new era, you just saw Jelinski as such an amazing, amazing first boot, such an amazing act for one episode, in and out. Zayn is very, very similar. If you like Jelinski's one episode act, you're gonna like Zayn's one episode.
I love you being like the Jake algorithm. I'm like, if you like Jelinski, you're really gonna like Zayn.
But like, no, seriously, like it's so good. I can see Zayn saying some things that Jelinski was saying. I know, like, not on the show, was like, I am the like Jelinski saying, I am the monster. It's like you can see the same thing coming out of Zayn's mouth.
I mean, Zayn had Frankenstein's monster tattooed on himself, so he really was the monster.
There you go. You looking at him in the way he speaks, I do think they were trying to recreate Russell's Russell Hantz a little bit, but obviously similar store brand though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In regards to the strategic portion.
So look, this is where we turn to like the wish portion of the wish list, because look, we don't know the theme for Survivor 50. We have no idea. But if there's a remote chance that first boots could be in consideration, I mean, you talk about like the Mountain Rushmore of first boots, in my opinion, is Sonia Christopher, who has tragically passed, Francesca, who has said that she does not want to come back anymore, Jelinski, and Zayn Knight. Yeah. And for what it's worth, you know, Zayn Knight has seemed seemingly active and at least watching the show. I know he's a regular on the Johnny Fairplay podcast with Matt Bischoff. Seems that he's still, you know, in the area, quite literally from a geographic perspective, as well as being at least interested in the show. He's only 40 years old. Would you want to see Zayn Knight take a second stab at Survivor, Jake?
You know what? I would. I like went back and forth on it, but like I think it's super interesting if they can get two people on the same beach with similar stories. Like if you got Jelinski and Zayn on the same beach, like it's happened before where it's like you see like, oh, you have Brandon Hantz and Eric on the same beach and they both gave away immunity. We never really got to see that story play out. But I do think there's like an interesting story here if like, you know, you see people interact with similar stories like that. But I think even if Jelinski wasn't on the season, Zayn's gonna Zayn. Like Zayn, I don't know if Zayn has grown. I'm sure he has, right, over the course of the past over 10 years. But what is he now? You know what I mean? Like what is the monster that is Zayn Knight?
It's a great question. And yeah, I would have to imagine that he's probably is still not going to shed some of that chaos to him. Like, I'm sure he's going to come in and listen, by comparison, it's going to be mild to anything that he does. He could tear the shelter apart and it would still be less chaotic than the way he was in Philippines. But I feel like this is a guy that also cannot sit on his hands, which would make some great TV. So, and listen, we talked about this when we ended up putting Billy on the ballot in sort of like this big omnibus special that I did with Rob, that he is one of these early boots that I think does pass the smell test a bit in terms of memorability, where, like you said, Jelinski may be the new hotness, but when it comes to first boots, Survivor fans remember Zayn Knight.
Yes. Yeah. If you watch this season, you might not remember the name Zayn, but you're like, who was that crazy guy who went on episode 1 of Philippines? Like Zayn, I think Zayn would be able to, he'd have enough to get over the hump of like, he's not forgotten about. If you've seen the season, you're going to remember. You show a picture, a quick flash. Oh, yeah, I remember him. He was running all over the place. Like, he didn't quit smoking. You know what I mean? Like, he's an easy pitch to CBS.
A couple of other people that I want to sort of dote on here that I think are all a little underrated, and I want to give their flowers to. The Angie Cookies answer was not bad, okay? Jeff reacted the most apoplectic, as if somebody had like cursed out somebody's mother, like they would 3 seasons from now. I don't know if it was a joke answer or if it was just a throwaway thing of like, oh, the thing I want right now is that we could have cookies. But the way that Jeff made it into an absolute mountain, Mount Everest out of the smallest of molehills, was a little unfair to Angie, who does, interestingly, I believe she was on the short list on the second chance ballot. Didn't ultimately make it, but that would have been interesting. Also, a little bit of justice for Katie as well. I feel like Jeff really dug into Katie with some of his challenge commentary. We were like at the peak spicy Jeff levels back in the 20s. I think Katie was unfortunately at the receiving end of it when, like, she wasn't terrible. Maybe she dragged her tribe down a couple times. I want to highlight Dawson as well because Dawson's a freak. And I say
Yeah.
that lovingly, but like Dawson did so many weird things and I almost forgot about it until I read a Funny 115 entry recently that reminded me about like the journey of Dawson, who is somebody who, if you watched her during any sort of background movement, cannot stand still. She's always dancing. She's always doing some sort of weird movement. She's the person who figures out who Jeff Kent is because she dated a guy who was really into baseball and then decides, despite being in the minority and being in trouble at her first tribal council, to then spend the afternoon trolling the shit out of Jeff Kent by saying, I really want to date an athlete, but it would have to be a football player or a basketball player. I don't think baseball players are really athletes, just endlessly digging into him and then culminating in her being so excited to see Jeff Probst. When Jeff visits Dana at camp to like medevac her, she is so completely kills the mood a la Courtney Merritt and Shane being naked by being like, oh, Jeff's on the beach. Isn't this great? She'll lay one on him after she's voted out and then do it in a more intimate way at the freaking reunion when she just bum rushes him on the stage of Studio City and plants one on him. But maybe one of the oddest things I've heard from her was actually in a secret scene. I don't know if you remember this, Jake, where like the Calabar tribe is talking about food and Dawson says, and I quote, I F for soft cheese. And it's just the icing on top of the cream cheese icing, perhaps, to quote those soft cheeses, on top
No, it
of
makes sense.
the enigmatic cake that is Sarah Dawson.
I mean, that kind of makes sense, Mike. You wouldn't?
I mean, I love me a soft cheese, personally. Ironically, I would get hard for soft cheese. All right, well, we have our own sample platter to divulge into right now, a charcuterie to sample, as we have to pick a few to maybe 4 people. I think, again, despite the gates being temporarily lifted in this halftime show, I think we're still going to keep it to the short list on keeping it to 3 to 4 people. And then if there are any people by popular demand that fans really, really want on the ballot, we can sort of clean them up after everything is said and done. But let's talk about the people from this season that we want to put on in today's podcast. Jake, give me the first name you want to nominate here.
We got to say Malcolm.
Yep.
Like, we got to go with the no-brainer first, right? Like, we got to say Malcolm. Malcolm's on there. Like, who's going to disagree with me? Like, come on. Like, we're like the Reddit. You can unify Reddit around this point, right? Like, we're pretty good.
Yeah,
We're
that's saying something. That yes, Malcolm will be the one to unite us at all these hard times. So Malcolm, welcome to the short list. Hopefully for time number 4. The other ones obviously are a bigger step down because obviously all of our other returnees are kind of out of the picture here. But I'll throw a bone to RC. I think RC, she had those couple of close calls. I think we make the call even closer this time around. She had personality. She had some momentum that promptly got stopped at the merge, and she definitely had some feistiness to her that I think could be really fun to see from a conflict perspective on a new era season.
Yeah, I think the thing with Asi, if you're thinking right now, I don't really remember Asi. I don't like why would I want to see Asi back? Go watch the Ponderosa videos. Like she speaks for herself on why she should be back. And the more we're talking about Asi, I just keep going, where was she on Game Changers? That's the biggest thing I'm taking out of this podcast is where was Asi on Game Changers?
All right, Jake, why don't you nominate another one here? Put someone in our third slot.
I will nominate Pete.
Okay.
I know
I'm for it,
Pete,
yeah.
Yep, Pete, he's probably overshadowed by a couple different people, but Pete brought a lot to the table. If you don't remember Pete, go back and watch him. Pete is the person who is going to start trouble when there is no need to start trouble. And one thing you can be sure of, that's always going to be good TV, and that's someone you want to see back on your screen. And you know what? I do think, Pete comes back. Pete's one of those names where it's like, I think Pete could come back and win. Just because he's not one of these people coming in and super high profile, but he is one of these people who I think it's fair to say that he's going to have some tricks up his sleeve, and he may be overlooked early on. And I think Pete has some winner upside if he comes back.
I totally agree, co-sign that. I mean, I think the real question we need to finish things off with is we do have a 4th spot that's up for grabs. I mean, would we want to give it to like a Jeff Ken? Would we want to give it to a Zane Knight and really go fantasy here?
I I love Jeff Kent. I don't need to see him again. I would be okay seeing Zane Knight again.
There we go.
Like even if he got Bruced out 44 style, you know what I mean? Like we're gonna see something, and even if we just see like free game interviews, I kind of just want to know what Zane Knight's up to.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
If Zane Knight goes to Ponderosa and then realizes he quits the game smoking again one day before the game and then opts out, he Melissa McNulty's it at the end of the day. I would love that interview. Why the hell not? In my opinion. Look, there might be some other people that others would want to have on. Again, we will address that when the time comes. But Zane Knight, yes, it's a wild idea to put a first boot on the ballot. But if there is any first boot to put on there, Zane Knight is definitely at the top of that list.
Zane Knight is at the top of the list. He's on the Mount Rushmore for first boots, as we said. I want to know what's been up with Zane Knight. If you watch Survivor and you don't want to know what's up with Zane Knight, you didn't watch Philippines.
What's interesting is that if you look at our four people, they pretty much go in like sequential age. We have Pete at 36, Malcolm at 37, RC at 39, and Zane at 40. So also sort of all within the same age bracket, but completely different personalities. Last thing I want to ask, Jake, as we do every podcast here, who from this cast would you want to see on a different show besides Survivor? Maybe Carter on Guy's Grocery Games?
Put Penner on everything. I know Penner's on the list, but like, put Lisa Whelchel on the Traders.
Ooh,
you know what I mean? Like, make Lisa Whelchel a trader.
And she kind of hits both of their markets, right? In that they like to bring in reality stars and like occasionally a couple of random celebrities. And so Lisa Whelchel will be able to satisfy both of those. I don't remember if Facts of Life is a NBC product. She is doing, I think, a show called like Collector's Call now on MeTV.com. Yes, that exists. Where she did a Survivor themed episode actually, where she like went to a Survivor memorabilia collection with somebody and brought Ethan alongside her. So she's definitely keeping herself out and about as a media personality. So I think that she would be super fun. I mean, Abby Maria for House of Villains would just be absolute gold casting.
She should, like, they should. If they already cast season 2, season 3, like, Abby should be on the short list of people that they call for House of Villains. Absolutely.
100%. Well, we have a short list winnowed down from the excellent cast of Survivor Philippines. We have, of course, Malcolm, Pete Yurkowski, RC, and Zane Knight to close it all off. Jake, any other things you want to say about Philippines, about the list in general before we look ahead to what's next?
I've been loving these so far. Like,
thank you.
Just going back and like, just some of the people that you forget about that you're like, oh wait, there's that person. Like, that would be really cool. Like, I don't know, like during Cambodia, like going back and with that whole voting process, going back and hey, there's a couple people you may have forgotten about, and going back and like, oh yeah, they really brought something to the table. So this has felt really refreshing watching these and hearing about the old people who should probably come back.
Well, thank you. But just when you thought it was safe to get out of the dark ages, we're going to take one dip back in, arguably, as tomorrow we're talking Survivor Karamoan, Malcolm's second season, and definitely his less regarded one. And what's interesting about this is, much like the first fans versus favorites, all the fans have been favorites have been accounted for in some way, shape, or form. All 10 favorites from season 26 have been talked about, either added to the list or have said that they would not want to come back. So, Jake, I know you have a wealth of options, but from all the sterling fans that participated in Survivor Karamoan, who would you want to see come back for season 50?
Of the fans in season 26.
Oh, yeah.
Sherry, justice for a fellow Zero Vote finalist.
There we go, exactly. Solidarity, Jake. Your membership to the club is not revoked at this moment. Well, we shall see whether we'll put Sherry through or whether we'll be told to sit down with our opinions. I'll be joined by your fellow New Era brethren, Omer Zahir, to talk through Karamoan. And look, that is a chaotic season in so many ways. I think having a chaotic person like Omer on will be a lot of fun. And regardless how many people we end up putting on, it should still be a fun time. I hope you all are having fun as well. It's great when we get to talk about seasons like this, where again, there are so many different options, so many different personalities. I was excited to revisit this one, especially with you, Jake. So thank you so much again. Anything you want to plug to the listeners out there about anything you might be doing?
No, not really. Just finished up Alice in Wonderland. I have another play in the fall. I'll plug it in something else, you know?
There we go. Well,
I don't have anything.
looking forward to seeing what happens next on stage as we set the stage for Survivor 50. We're back tomorrow with Omer Zahir talking Survivor Karamoan. Thank you all so much for listening. Until tomorrow, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.